Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here today. This is a DCLK, or a Diversity Collective Lanka event. Who is Diversity Collective Lanka? That's what I'm here to sort of talk to you all a little bit about and welcome you, and then we'll get on with the show. So Diversity Collective Lanka is an association that came into being about 5 years ago, bringing like-minded men and women together. It started in the tech industry. The Asian Development Bank, along with PwC, kind of brought us together because they felt there wasn't enough inclusion in the corporate sector, especially in tech. That's kind of how we were born. So now, as an association, DCLK worked towards bringing inclusion, bringing in the conversation of inclusion into Sri Lanka. That's kind of our objective and vision. How do we work? We work through 4 pillars. We've started talking with students and universities to try and make sure the understanding of what inclusion is, what equity is, and the right for dignity and respect early on as much as possible. We also work in the space of entrepreneurship because we see there aren't enough women entrepreneurs, not enough in tech-enabled entrepreneurs, etc. happening. And the 4th pillar is the corporate pillar. We're here today because of the corporate pillar. This is an event that we're doing to bring academia and the corporates together to share some great practices and learnings and research that has been done. I'm going to hand over to Gayani, who is Gayani Ranasinghe, who's a DCLK member, who's the catalyst for this event, which is very much trying to bring some of the research done in Sri Lanka in our local universities. And being March, International Women's Day, we thought it would be a great time to celebrate 3 of these women in academia who've done a lot of work and great insights into what we can do better. So we thought a great way to actually celebrate March. We're working with Twinery, our sponsors, that's why we're here today, as well as Articulate, who's helping us with keeping us involved and sharing our knowledge. So let me hand over to Gayani, who will say a little bit about herself and the work she's doing in this space and the plan for today. Thanks.
Thank you, Bani. So my name is Gayani Ranasinghe. First of all, I'll introduce myself, and then maybe I'll spend a few minutes and talk about the objective of our discussion today. I started my career in labor law, employment relations, and my career started actually in the garment industry, and I'm no stranger to MAS. I worked for 11 years there. In my role, I was very fortunate to be in a cluster that was tiny. So over the years, it grew. And with that growth, brought a lot of exposure for me personally. Especially, I dealt a lot when humans were being human. So they were not at their best. I had a lot of contentious issues to deal with. I dealt a lot with misconduct, sexual harassment, labor unrest, retrenchment. You know the space. It's contentious. With that, I wanted to really share what was dignity at work and how do I make it not just for one corporate, but how can we extend it, not only in Sri Lanka, but globally. And with that, I moved out of MAS really in 2019 with that vision to spread that message, dignity at work. I started my consultancy specifically on dignity at work and respectful workplaces. I worked a lot with corporates globally, locally, lots of civil society organizations, focusing primarily on women at work, the LGBTIQ persons at work, persons with disability at work. And in this journey, I bumped into DCLK. I started working with them. And that's really through my project with the International Finance Corporation on respectful workplaces, for which I am their global lead trainer for not only for Sri Lanka, but for the global projects that we have on respectful workplaces and inclusive workplaces. And I was having a chat with Barney about what do we do for Women's Day. And I didn't want it to be something that everybody else does. Because in these 4 years, I've learned a lot about what the world of academia has known for years, but which the corporate world really has no clue about still. And how do we bridge this knowledge gap? And that's really how I embarked on my own studies, and I bumped into Professor Arosha here. And she is actually my supervisor. And we started talking about women at work, the obstacles that women face. And what we realized was that in terms of the corporate world, people are interested. They do want women at work, but sometimes we may not have a holistic approach towards some of the initiatives and interventions that we are having, because maybe we don't really understand what is meant by the systemic obstacles that women face. Knowledge on that is a little fuzzy. We're not very clear. So the aim really today in this discussion is to really ground what we are going to talk about. We're talking about women at work, but what are these systemic issues or obstacles or challenges that women face, and what can we do? If you have a better idea of why we call it systemic, then you understand then some of the interventions we do may be like window dressing, and it's not really solving the problem. So that's a little bit about what we're hoping to do. And the other objective really is to make you all a little bit curious, to know about what is the world of academia doing, what's their research about, is there something we can learn, incorporate in our daily lives in corporates. And I think it's also to create that curiosity of learning. So let me introduce you to the panel. On my left here is Professor Arosha Adikaram. She is the Chair Professor of Human Resource Management at the Faculty of Management at Finance, University of Colombo. She currently serves as the Acting Director of the Center for Gender Equality at the University of Colombo. Arosha has authored many books and book chapters by national and international publishers, and has published her research extensively in ranked, reputed international journals in the areas of labor law, employee relations, sexual harassment at the workplace, and research methodology. Arosha has also presented her research in numerous local journals and international conferences. She was awarded one of the 10 outstanding young persons in 2010 by Junior Chamber International Sri Lanka, and was also awarded the Pride of HR Award by the World HRD Congress in Mumbai in 2010. She was awarded the University of Colombo Vice Chancellor's Award for Research Excellence in Management and Finance in 2016 and 2018, as well as the Senate Award for Research Excellence in 2018 and Commendation in 2019 and 2021. In 2021, she was awarded the prestigious Literati Award by Emerald Publishers for outstanding paper. So please welcome Arosha Adikaram. Next up, we have Dr. Seuwandhi Ranasinghe. Is a senior lecturer in the Department of Management and Organization Studies in the University of Colombo. She joined the academic staff of the department in year 2008 and is a CEDA UK accredited teacher in higher education. Her research interest lies in feminist and post-colonial research and research focusing on marginalized groups of working women in Sri Lanka. She obtained her Bachelor of Business Administration degree and Master of Business Administration degree from the Faculty of Management and Finance, University of Colombo, and obtained her PhD from the Adam Smith Business School, University of Glasgow, UK. She currently serves as the managing editor of Colombo Business Journal, which is a double-blind, peer-reviewed scholarly journal in the field of business and management. managed by the Faculty of Management and Finance, University of Colombo. Please welcome Seuwandhi. And last but not least, we have Pavithra Kailasapathy, is a professor in Human Resource Management at the Faculty of Management and Finance, University of Colombo. She was the head of the Department of Human Resource Management from 2010 to 2013 and from 2017 until April 2019. She graduated from the University of Colombo with a BBA degree and has master's degrees, not one, but two, I think, master's degrees from the New School for Social Research, New York, and the University of Massachusetts. And the South Asian Journal, I beg your pardon, and her PhD is from the University of Melbourne, Australia. From 2013, Pavithra was an associate editor in the South Asian Journal of Human Resource Management, and from 2021, the editor-in-chief. Her research interests are in the areas of work-family conflict and gender issues in organization. Pavithra lectures in areas such as HRM, research methodology, and gender issues in organizations. She is a reviewer of papers for many local and international journals and conferences. Please welcome Pavithra. So with that, what we are going to first do is we are going to ground our research. And for that purpose, I will hand over the control to Arosha, who will tell you about the setting. Why are we really here today, right? So she will ground us on the background of today's discussion. Where does the Sri Lankan woman stand today?
Hi, good evening. All what was said about us would have been like, new to you, but this is how the language that we use in academia, where we try to build our credentials, sort of. But anyway, coming to this, so the setting that I'm trying to show you today is just to show you where women are in Sri Lanka, because having done work or when I do work related to women in organizations, I come across instances where some of the things that I show you today is being criticized or debated, where when I say there are very few women at top levels, people would say, no, we have this woman leader in our director board, or we have 2 women in our management team. But I wanted to show the bigger picture and show you where women actually stand in Sri Lanka before we move on to a more deeper discussion. So I'm sure you all know that from the population we have majority being represented by women, or majority of our population is women. 2019 it's 51.6. And we are set to have a good literacy rate for women, 94.6, which is said to be quite good in Asia. But of course, when we look at the employment of women, we see that the number is quite low. So out of the labor force participation, only 31.8 are women. Now, the sad part, or where we need to be very concerned, is the fact that labor force participation of women has been going down over the years. So in 2010, the number was 41%. So in 2010, female labor force participation was 41%. But now we see that over the years, it has steadily come down, and now we stand at 31.8. And of course, the unemployment is, of course, high for women. But when we look at higher education, and especially the national universities, we see that more women get eligible for higher education in Sri Lanka. And when you look at the graduate output, we have 71% who graduate. The graduate output, or those who graduate from universities, 71% are women. In certain faculties, it's quite high. Like if you say take art faculties, it's 80, I think even 90% in certain instances of those who enter and those who graduate are women. And earlier there were more men in disciplines such as engineering, IT, and all of that. But now, even there, the numbers, female output has gone up, which is good. But then, again, the area for concern is when you take the unemployment of graduates, 83% of the unemployed graduates are women. So a lot of, if you take the state universities, it's free education. So the money, the effort, all of that is put to educate these women do not get the opportunity for various reasons to participate in the labor force and, of course, to achieve their dreams. We all know when we study, we do a degree, we have all these dreams of, achieving high, doing all these jobs and positions, but how many get to really reach their goals? And so I've just looked at some other statistics also, and I've looked at the convicted prisoners, just for fun, and I could see that only 2.2 of the convicted prisoners are women. And then wanted to see how emotionally stable women are, but this is not an indication of emotional stability, of course, but this was something that I thought was interesting. So if you take the suicide rate, 20.6% of the suicides are by women. So again, comparatively a lesser number. Life expectancy, we all know women have higher life expectancy. But then again, when you look at violence and harassment, a lot of violence and harassment for women. Domestic violence, we see 20.4%. That would be the minimum. There would be, the numbers can of course vary. And if you say, if you take harassment and sexual harassment at workplace, it's more than 50%. So when you say more than 50%, 1 out of 2 women would be harassed at their educational institutes or at their workplaces. So, so all this, of course, tell you something, but if I'm to show you some of the research findings, researchers say that marriage substantially lowers a woman's odds of being employed by 26% compared to unmarried women. We don't have to depend on the numbers. When we look around, we see this, right? And we would have, some of us would also have experienced this. And having children younger than the age of 5 reduces women's labor market participation by 7.4% compared to women without young children. And the same factors does not have any effect on men. Whether they are married, whether they have young children, has no effect on their employment. And men are twice as likely as women to be employed in Sri Lanka. And if you look at the employed population by employment status and gender, 2021 numbers, I just want to bring your attention to these two. Contributing family worker status. If you look at the contributing family workers, you see females, there are 15.2% of the females are contributing family workers, whereas only 2.4% of men are contributing family workers. Do you know who contributing family workers are? When a household member is engaged in a family business or farming, and the other members who engage in this activity without any payment are identified as contributing family members. Okay, so I'm sure you get what I'm trying to tell. And of course, again, a lot of research indicate, and it's known that by increasing female participation in the workforce, you can increase the GDP. So Sri Lanka could add 14% to its annual GDP by 2025 by increasing female labor force participation, the number of paid hours women work. And also women in, having more women in higher productivity sectors. And if the gender gap were to be completely closed in 50 years, Sri Lanka could see as income gain of 21% in 2065. Okay, so again, similar findings where the importance of increase in female labor force participation is indicated. And then, of course, we talk a lot about this salary payment gap between men and women. Just wanted to bring that also to your attention. So these are again the numbers, or how the difference between men and women in their earnings. Again, the perceived wage gap for similar work was 0.63, meaning women earn just 63 cents on the dollar compared to men. So I will also show you where women stands in leadership positions in organizations. So there was this study done by Colombo Stock Exchange where they've looked at their listed companies to see how many women are in the director boards of the companies that are listed at Colombo Stock Exchange. As you can see, the numbers vary in different sectors. Banking, finance, and insurance, there is a comparatively better representation of women in their director boards, but a lot of the other sectors, it's not the case. But even in banking sector, there are certain banks, if you just go to their director boards, you know, just do a quick search, you would see in certain banks, the director board consists of all men. So only 136 women out of a total of over 1,500 directors in director boards in Sri Lanka. So I did my own research looking at the top 30 companies in Sri Lanka in 2021. So I could see that 12 companies had only one female director. 10 did not have any female directors. So 10 of the 30 companies did not have a single female director in their director board. 8 companies had 2 or 3 female directors, and only one CEO and one chairman were females. Overall, 292 men and 30 females. And again, this is in a context where we have 52%, almost 52% of women in the population, and more women, you know, passing out from universities, gaining qualifications in various professional bodies. So I've also looked at the leadership in governance. I'm sure you know the numbers. I think now, currently, there are no women in the cabinet. As far as I know, I might be wrong, but if there are, it might only be one. But in 2020, we had one female. So again, I thought maybe I'll compare with a good country. Sorry? That's not? No, that's not me, not this Pavithra, another Pavithra. So I thought I'll just compare with Finland. Finland, you would have seen yesterday or a few days back, I saw Finland to be the happiest country in the world, was identified to be the happiest country in the world. So look at their cabinet. So maybe why we are unhappy has something to do with our cabinet, constitution of our cabinet. Finland's cabinet features a significant number of women, of course. 12 portfolios are held by women and only 7 held by men. And the parliamentarians, 47% are women. And then again, there are a lot of research that shows the importance of females in the governance, in governments, leadership positions. And then I've been intrigued by these different professional bodies that we come across, that we are part of sometimes, looking at their leadership compositions. I've again seen this huge disparity. So I've started with where I'm part of, where I'm a member of, and Pavithra Miss is also a member of this organization, Chartered Institute of Management. I've looked at their past presidents over the years. You know, HR is a profession where there are a lot of females. But then when you look at the past presidents of CIPM, you see only one lady somewhere in 1967 or so. All other are men. Then another institute that I'm associated with, Sri Lanka Institute of Marketing. Over the years, they are past presidents. Luckily, we had last year one female as the president. I've looked at, there are various councils and committees for engineering, but I've, you know, same constitution. So I've looked at Engineering Council Sri Lanka. This is what how it looks like. This is the council, and mind you, 32% of the graduates passing out from engineering faculties in Sri Lanka are females? Are their voice represented anywhere? Then I've looked at SLASCOM. I know there was a female president last year or year before, Sandra. We have two. They have two females in their board of directors. Again, 47% of the graduates of computer science are females. I've looked at the Bar Association. No president in the Bar Association has been a female. Their management committee consists of all males. Their executive committee has only 7 females out of 47 members. And 60% of those who are admitted as attorneys at law are females. 65%. Okay, so where are their voices? So I thought, okay, I'll look at some other sectors, maybe look at where women are said to be the best. Cooking. The top 10 chefs in Sri Lanka, apparently men. And then I've looked at teachers association, because majority of the teachers are women. That's where it is said that teaching is a very good profession for women. It's the caring, you know, that short hours, they have more hours to look after their family, all of that, a good profession for women. But then if you look at unions that represent these teachers, there are only one female. This is Nursing Officers Association, again, another profession where women, again, caring nature, women are said to be more suitable. Again, you have more men. And then I've also come across these various flyers. You know, you'll also be getting these flyers on social media, on other places, of various panel discussions. Not much, not on Women's Day programs. Of course, Women's Day panel discussions, it's mainly women. But you take any other topic, you would see all men or few women in these panel discussions. These are just randomly selected, you know, not because there are more men. You can start noticing this from now on, because we do a lot of work in this area. We notice this when we come across these. Whatever the topic is, whether it's about children, whether it's about sustainability, whatever it is, you have more men. So this recent one on tax and the government recession and all of that, it's all men who make the decisions and who decide what is right, what is wrong, what should be done. Where are the voices of women again? Okay, so this is, so with all of that, recently we, in our university, when there is a convocation, we get the updates of it. We all get an email saying this is, we had the convocation successfully. And then we get the photographs, and then we got this photograph of the medalists, those who got medals. Remember, we discussed this. So we got this recently of 2020 convocation. We had it recently, really, because of the COVID situation. So the first thing that I noticed was all the medalists, everybody who had gotten medals, were women. Imagine the efforts that they would have had to put into get into that position or getting a medal. But what would be their future, you know, in terms of course, getting a job or remaining in their job? What would happen after they get married, after they have a kid? Would they be selected when the company is making a decision about giving a promotion? Then just to see whether this might be the same, I've just looked at another few areas. So SLIM, the achievers, there are 2 men, but again, majority women. I thought I'll look at an area that is said to be more male dominant, STEM area. again this, but of course there would be others where men also get a lot of, medals and recognition and all of that. But I'm just trying to make a point. So with all of these achievements, and then when you look at the numbers and the position of women, as I've shown you earlier, where are we going wrong? What is wrong with this situation in this context? So these statistics clearly indicate that we need to promote female participation in the labor force, of course. And it also shows the underrepresentation of women in certain categories of employment and certain levels of employment. And also, it shows us the need for equal pay and the lack of voice for women. So with that, I will just stop, and we can discuss more as to why this is and what we need to be doing about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Arosha. Do we have any questions from the audience? We can stop a bit and ask if there is any. No? You're good to go? Wait, let us pass you a mic.
So I was very interested to see what you had researched in terms of female participation in Sri Lanka. Is it the same in other countries in South Asia, or you have done any work, or is there something that we can refer to?
It is the same, it is similar, not the same, similar in certain countries in South Asia, but certain countries, I'm sure, I've not gone into deep on that, but I'm sure there are differences, and a lot of the countries are actually improving their labor force participation rate, while in Sri Lanka the numbers are reducing.
I think in India and Bangladesh, the women in politics, in parliament, is much greater than us. Also like in their lower village level, local government, as well as in their central and state level, there are much more women than Sri Lanka.
I thought it was interesting, great presentation by the way, and I thought it was interesting over, I think, the last 10 years or so that we saw a decrease in female labor participation. Did that have anything to do with the war, or what, do you have any idea about what caused that?
This is after the war, from 2010 onwards. So there are multiple reasons, some of the reasons we might even discuss, I suppose. Social, the systematic, discrimination that had been taken place, and for me, I think mainly, as I see it, mainly the gender role stereotyping that has been, that has not seen to have, can't say improved, like, it has consistently been there, but now I suppose maybe it has come to a level where women are, stay back more. Companies are more interested in taking men aboard. Well, I'm sure there are many reasons, and it is an area that maybe we need to look into and research more. To my knowledge, I couldn't find a reason for that, but yeah.
I think with the economic crisis, this has become even worse, because I think they have calculated that we have lost over 5 million jobs, 500,000 or something. The IMF has, recently with this economic crisis that we are facing, it is the women who are thrown out of the labor force and the jobs. So I think that is even worse now with the instances of crisis.
Actually, research has found out in tourism sector, 67% of the jobs that were lost because of the crisis were female jobs where the females were holding positions. So, but then even before the crisis, the numbers were going down anyway. So it was standing at 33%, 32%. Now in 2021, it has come down to 31.8.
Okay, thanks for that. Do you know also where, so we have a lot of migrant workers who may be going to, say, the Middle East, for example. Where does that factor into the numbers?
Okay, with regard to migrant, so I'm doing a bit of research on migrant women. The numbers are reducing. More men are leaving. Now it's about 40% of women in this country are leaving, and about 60% migrant workers are men. So many reasons for that, and the government is also promoting more men to go rather than more women to go. And there's also a lot of restrictions on women, like having children, and if you have listened to news recently about this this household beating of the father, the child by the father. That child was about 2 years old, and the question was how is it legal for the mother to leave a child of 2 years? Because the law states that, or the policy of Sri Lanka Bureau of Foreign Employment is that only a mother can leave only if the child is over 2 years or 5 years. 5 years. So then it's a fundamental human right violation also, because then it's a violation of mobility of women. So then it also comes into, why can't the father look after the child? Why is it only the responsibility of the mother? So women are constrained, restricted on leaving for jobs, and when they do, they go on visit visa, which is very dangerous. They are not registered with the Sri Lanka Bureau of Foreign Employment. If they were registered, then there would be officials coming and checking on the family and seeing what is actually happening. When such restrictions are there, they take alternative measures, and they actually, then they get into a lot of trouble as well.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, just one point I want to mention. When you talked about Asia, there is a distinct difference between Southeast Asia and Asia. Like it's 30% in the 30s for Southeast Asia, while it's 60 and 70% for the rest of Asia. One more question? Okay.
Thank you very much for sharing those great statistics. I think it will actually give us more ammunition to speak on behalf of the professional lady. So we represent textiles. So you can see we had about 1%. Having looked at all these numbers, so this is the current state, what we see. What is your future? What does the future look like with all these changing context? Because we believe like we have come to a kind of a milestone with post-COVID, and we are seeing a lot of things changing, and that has affected our position as women and what we do and all that. So what is our state for the future? Are we going to continue this way, or like what sort of numbers that we can see? Can we have a gauge out of that?
We're going to hold on to that question because Pavithra is going to be talking about it. And, or do you want to address it now? Okay.
Well, I'm always, personally, I always live in hope. Otherwise, I would have left this country long ago. So I always hope that whether it's the labor force participation or the gender issues that we face, everything, won't be solved, but it will get better. But there are, I would say, baby steps being done. Let's say when it comes to women in politics, there have been attempts to all women's independent groups contesting, push. I know last time for the general election, there were women's group pushing for have women in at least nomination so that voters have a choice to put. So I think in multiple ways, in multiple areas, there has to be constant push, not just by women, but everybody. So everybody needs to push for fairer representation, whether it's in governance, whether it's in politics, whether it's in corporates, wherever. Now in our faculty, more than 50% of the students I think this time it's like 60 or 70% of the students in our management faculty are women. But if you take the students' union, only men. So we are eternally pushing every time there is an election for students' union. We are saying, don't just have one female token representative. There should be more voice of women's issues coming up in the faculty. Because like men, it's sometimes their issues, what they bring up are very different to the faculty board and to the faculty. So like that, we have, it's like you can't say, oh, I've done it, that's it. No, this is the constant fight, constant effort. And certain things so this is where I suppose I'm jumping into what I was supposed to say. It has to start from, at least so that the next generation would be different. So how we bring up our children, how aware they are about the gender issues, how sensitive they are, right? So we were sort of having a discussion before this among ourselves, and we said, after being married to 3 strong feminists, how her husbands have changed, how sensitive they have become on gender issues. So we have, it's not just women's role to make these changes, to make a better Sri Lanka, but everybody.
So yeah, it is an economic issue as well and a social issue. So we all have to work towards it, towards making sure that, that equality and equity is there. And yeah, it has to start from somewhere, and it is, the family is the place that it has to start.
I'm sorry, I'm going to hold that question. In the interest of time, we will definitely come back to your question, because there's another topic that I'm keen to kind of get at, right? And this is about, I've really heard this a lot from corporates, right? We are meritocracy, we're a meritocracy company, we have our own code of conduct, whatever the culture that's outside, we have our own culture, and we rock with our culture, right? And like, we are gender neutral. I'm a gender neutral manager. You hear all these comments. So I think I'd like Seuwandhi maybe to kind of explain to us our organization's gender neutral spaces.
I think my job was easier because the background was laid and you all saw the numbers and pictures. When our society is not gender neutral, when our culture is not gender neutral, when our economy is not gender neutral, how can organizations be gender neutral? So the overwhelming answer is organizations are not gender neutral. When we say gender neutral, we mean there is no gender-based assumptions, stereotypes, discrimination. So there wouldn't be any gender-based assumptions made on people, stereotypes, discriminations, and dominations made by that organizations, whereas that doesn't happen. So the answer would be no.
All right, thank you for that. So then, what is a gendered organization, I think, or how can an organization be gendered?
Okay, so this was a interesting area of research. So in the 1990s, when in the academia, in research, they were looking at organizations, studying organizations, and most of the organizations, anybody studied, any researcher studied, saw the organization as a gender-neutral space. But then John Acker in the 1990s came up and said, is it really? Is it really? So if you look at organizations' work force, if you look at the design of organizations, if you look at leadership positions, the dynamics, if you look at the language, communication, how it seems to be there is something there which is not gender neutral. So there is organizations, so Gayani theorized that organizations are gendered, and we have been talking about this since then, researching on those lenses that organizations are not gendered. So for instance, if I take a sector that I've done research on, plantation industry. So if you look at plantations, it's a massively gendered sector where you see a lot of plantation plucking women. Majority of the workforce are women. But if you look at the top bit, the leadership dynamic, the CEO of a plantation company can only be a planter. So how does, there is not a single female planter, there is no way that you can become a female planter as well. Based on that structure, so organizations, certain organizations are structured very much towards a gendered side. So there could be different degrees of how gendered an organization could be, but in general all organizations are gendered.
So I've also come across this concept of an ideal worker.
Yes, so it's a good question in an organizational setting. Who could be an ideal worker? So again, with research with Gayani, they would say this seems to be this abstract, disembodied human being is this ideal worker. So ideal worker would be somebody who is available 24/7, who can be willing to go anywhere you love that person to go, geographically mobile, doesn't have anybody to take care of, there's no children around, there is no parent to look after, there is no sick spouse or child or whatever. So an ideal worker doesn't have any gaps in their work. So, because having a gap in your CV is quite, a negative thing for you. So they don't have any gaps, they work continuously and they work hard and the work is what they, are. So when you look at this notion of this subconscious, perhaps people don't say that this is an ideal worker consciously, but subconsciously when you think of an ideal worker, it is very similar to a man, and a woman doesn't fall into that category of an ideal worker.
But then, to be honest, no man can technically fall into that
Absolutely.
category
So this is a very, you call this, a very masculine kind of a conceptualization of, we call this the word just missed me, hegemonic masculinity, no? It's heterosexual masculinity. Yeah. So hegemonic masculinity is something that we, enforce on there. Okay, there's a question already.
Yeah, let's get a mic.
I think it's good to keep engaged rather than us.
Thanks. So from what you just said, the concept of the ideal worker was defined when women were not participating in the workplace at all. Certainly not in corporate settings, etc. So the ideal worker, by definition, excluded a lot of the realities for women. So are you then saying that we need to completely, globally redefine the ideal worker in a much more inclusive way and a more realistic way to value and respect and support the realities of women in the workplace?
Absolutely, yes. And I think that definition didn't change with, as you nicely said, the realities of the present day. And yes, we do need to change, because men are very much caregivers. They are very much participating in their children's lives these days. They are caregivers themselves. So we can't actually define it. That's why we say it's hegemonic masculine kind of a construction. Yes, we need to.
It puts pressure on men as well, when they want to take care of a sick parent or a child, they also go out of that ideal worker conception, and that would be considered in their performance appraisals, promotions, all of that. And I was thinking, do we need to have a definition of ideal worker? Yeah. So, yeah.
So I have a question about this ideal workaround. I think the next generations keep also pushing just not on the women part of it, but overall what an ideal worker should be. Because their view is that they want work-life balance. They want to be able to spend time at home, outside, do whatever they want as well. So with that, does it progress the agenda here as well, where we are also moving we're moving towards the ideal worker as what it should be?
I think we shouldn't have one kind of a construction of what it is. But I think it's a good point that you mentioned about different generations of people coming in, and we should be able to change. Corporates, organizations should be changing with those changes rather than expecting everybody to behave in a particular way. So thank you for that question.
Hi, thanks for that. Thank you for the research and the data gathering. It was very insightful. So my question was, much like the migrant workers weren't included in this data set yet, I know you said you mentioned doing the research, what about the self-employed? Like women, because we don't work in traditional spaces, so banks not necessarily where we go and keep our money and have access to traditional financial routes, but what about the self-employed?
So they are included in these statistics, and the employer, some of them would be. But if it's in informal sector, some of the workers in the informal sector, we were having that discussion. So some of the workers in the informal sector are not covered, might not be covered in these statistics. And a lot of females are also in the informal sector. But employer, under employer category, they are covered. Entrepreneurs, self-employed. So they would be included in the numbers.
So, but when you also say that majority of women work in the informal sectors, and if I give like examples of the home bakers, a small beauty salon, or you're selling fruits outside, you're self-employed, you're generating revenue, but that also means that person is in a precarious position because you don't necessarily have the social safeguards that should be coming to you, like maybe access to loans, I think would be an issue. Any other challenges like that?
Okay, with regard to this, with regard to the informal sector, one of the biggest problems is their numbers are not included. They are not in the policy making. Hence, they are, the government don't see that they exist, and therefore policies are not made for them. So that is a big, there's so much of women working in let's say fisheries, let's say, so many sectors in this country. Yes, agriculture is a big sector of such. So they are not considered even in instances of where they, give support to people who are in economic hardships because they are not part of the policy. So during the COVID, one of the things that I saw in research was that a lot of women lost their jobs, lost their businesses, self-employed. The hit was to the women who were self-employed. And some of them shifted online to Facebook, social media to do their businesses there. And, one of the things that I heard with, research on Center for Policy Analysis, what they were saying is that the biggest switch was made by women to social media, self-employed women, not men. So, and they were able to, do certain things and manage in that way. But of course, as you mentioned, there is no protection for them because they are in a very precarious situation.
So with all of that, how can we undo, or can we undo, gendering of organizations?
Yes. So can we undo inequality regimes in an organization? We would be hopeful to say yes. Now, before that, I would like to, take your attention to the late 19th century, early 20th century, the first wave feminist movement, if you've heard. That was a big movement to get the right for women to vote. So why women gave up their lives in certain instances to fight for the right to vote, because they didn't have any, and they thought if we have the right to vote, we will make changes in our countries, in our decisions and policies. Whether it is a reality or not is questionable, but that's what the aspiration was. So when it comes to whether certain things are possible, this theme of women in leadership comes to light. So one of the things that people or researchers talk about is if we have more women in leadership positions, things would change. Not one or two women, board members or one CEO, one president that we had would change anything. It would be larger numbers of women, whether they can be change agents or whether they are part of the cogs in the same machine, because we say organizations are well-oiled machines. So some of the women are cogs in these machines, in the old way of doing things. Some are change agents. So one of the things that happened is when one or two women go up, they identify with the power in the organization and they want to identify with that. And they see other women as weaker and subordinate, and they don't see that as something to be supportive. But when larger numbers of women come in, then this stereotyping would really go down on what women can do and can't do, and certain forms of discriminations would be addressed, and mentoring programs would be there for more women to come up. There would be networks which would support this much more inclusive setting. So it's not just the women's responsibility, I would say. It is everybody's responsibility, and it is a social responsibility, and it is all men and women as inclusive, including all of us, is what we all need to do to change this.
Thank you for that, Seuwandhi. I'd like to move to you, Pavithra. So, given the background of Sri Lanka, and given that organizations are gendered, what can organizations do?
Okay. So first of all, there are three things that I would like to point out. First is that before I jump into what corporate should do or what are the best practices, that corporates and anybody should remember women are not a homogeneous group. Not everybody is the same, right? So there are differences, okay. Superficially we can say, okay, single women, married women, divorced women, educated women, women from urban, rural, which sector, in terms of religion, what our values are, right? Sexual orientation, right? So based on all that, so we need to remember when we are talking, we have to be also sensitive that one single policy, one practice will not fit all women. So organizations should have multiple policies, practices to cater to the needs of different women in their organizations to bring about equality and equity, right? And also, when we were talking about gender, we sort of tended to be binary, but gender is also not binary. So that also we need to be very sensitive about. So moving
Pavithra,
on.
can I
Yeah, sure.
stop you there? And maybe if you could explain what you mean by binary.
Okay. I mean, if you look at surveys, even our surveys I'm guilty of, we always ask whether you are male or female, right? We just directly ask male or female, but in terms of gender identity, it's not just male or female. Based on your sexual orientation, you can, you know, there are LGBTQ spectrum, yeah. And new ones are being, I mean, earlier it was just gays and yeah, BTQ plus, so we need to be very sensitive about that and see. So even based on that, you know, your policies have to be very different. So in terms of what corporates can do, first of all, when you have policies, one thing, yes, you need to have policies, practices to bring about gender equity, equality. But these policies and practices, you don't just pay lip service to it. You need to firmly believe in it and practice. Because in one of the research that both Arosha and I did on sexual harassment, what we found was when the perpetrator or alleged perpetrator is middle level or lower level, companies took action against the perpetrator, but it was when it was the director, nothing happened, right? So that sends wrong message. You say you have zero tolerance, you have all these code of conduct, sexual harassment policies, but it's not uniformly implemented. So if you really are zero tolerant for sexual harassment, you want gender equality, whoever it may be, the perpetrator, whether it's the director, the best performer, you don't want to lose the best performer, so you sort of, you know, shift that person there and the victim to another sector. You can't do that, right? So you need to firmly believe in it and practice those so that it becomes really part of the organizational culture, treating everybody equally, right? The other thing that the corporates need to do is don't have training programs only for women. Both men and women need to be sensitized. If we need to change our attitude and bring about more representation in women in corporates, both have to be changed. Because we have seen enough evidence. We might have a woman president or female prime minister in, I mean, not just Sri Lanka, we have seen women prime ministers in South Asia, right? But do they really fight for the cause of women? Did the laws really change for women, right? So because we have to understand, yes, based on sex or gender, they might be female women, but they have been brought up, socialized in a very masculine, patriarchal society. So that's how they think. So you need to sensitize both men and women about gender equality and equity if we really want to bring about. So many things matter, like not just for corporates, these type of sensitization, changing of attitudes, then they take it back home to how their families function, how they bring up their children. And then what was brought up earlier in terms of gender, this ideal worker, there's this thing, think manager, think male. Consciously, unconsciously, when we think, you know, who is an effective leader, who is an effective manager, unconsciously or consciously, it's the male. So think manager, think. So think even in our undergraduate MBA classes, when, you know, students participate, bring up examples, they always say, you know, he, referred to manager or leader as he. I always say, you know, can't there be a female leader? Can't you even say she or he? It's always referred to as he, because consciously, unconsciously, they think leader, manager, good manager is male. So those type of thinking lead to what I call damned if you do, damned if you don't, right? So if women behave as a manager or leader in the stereotypical women's way, feminine way, people then say, oh, she's too, emotional, cries for everything, she's too softy, to be a manager or leader, you need to be, decisive, aggressive, take decision, right? And then if you do show those type of aggressive, decisive, strong personality, she's like a man. No, she's not a woman. So that's why I say damned if you do, damned if you don't. So we need to decide what we want, right? What sort of people we want in our organizations. And so organizations have to be very cautious and conscious of the message they give, starting from recruitment, the advertisements they place, the language in the advertisements. So I took a cursory look at the top jobs advertisements sort of randomly, and I was happy to say quite a lot were using gender neutral terminology, because those days in the newspapers they will say, I want a female clerk or a male security guard. So very gender specific in their advertisements. But today I saw there were, but still there were a few. Let me just show you this. So this was an ad in top jobs for assistant manager food beverage. If you went through the entire advertisement, it was very gender neutral. They didn't specify what gender the person should be, but specified only the skills and all that. But they put a picture of a male, right? So indirectly, the message the person gets is we want a male assistant manager, right? So language was careful, but pictures are also communication. And this one, they specifically said, post of production executive, they want a female. I really didn't know why this candle company, anybody should be able to, equal opportunity should be there for whether it's male or female, why it should be only for a female. So going back 30 years, when I was in the final year of my undergraduate, one of the MNCs came for recruiting graduates. And all the videos, pictures they showed of the MNC were all men. So at the end of their session, I actually went up and asked, should I be here? Should I apply? Do you have women working in your organization? Because that's the message I got. But 30 years since, I was happy to see that MNC has won awards for the female-friendly workplace and all that. So things have changed over time. So similar to the language communication in recruitment process, even the advertisements. It's a strong way to convey a message. I have seen advertisement for a tea where racial integration is used. A soap advertisement for against eve teasing, how women should become stronger to resist eve teasing. But of course, there are also some products that skin whitening products where it perpetuates women should be fair and beautiful and fair skin and lovely and all that to get married and all that. So yeah, so language communication. And so as I said in the beginning, you should have a lot of policies and practices for equality, equity, but it's not enough just to have a list on your annual report or website saying we have this policy, that policy, but there should be no penalty for those who are making use of it. Think about why men don't make use of the paternity leave. We had paternity leave. People didn't make use of it. Why? We have flexible, sometimes flexi work and things like that sometimes, or we had extended maternity leave. People don't make use of it. Why? Because there is a penalty for in your career when some people make use of these policies and practices.
Sorry, Professor Pavithra, I just want to stop you a little bit. When we talk about language, could even words that are used like lamaya, like when you're addressing staff or workers, that too has an impact. Am I right?
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know how it is in professional institution. I think this also starts in the university level, school. Yeah, because of our culture, we address people, akka, ayya, all these. Even after marriage, if the love affair was with a senior, they call their husbands ayya and things like that. So that sort of calling others in those terms continues when you go to work. So they still call, start calling their supervisors sir, madam, and then the other way of top down, where you start calling them, like even in the university, some lecturers call their students as putta, and I always fight because saying university students are not school students, they are adults, right? Treat them adults, not as your children. Don't call them putta and dua, right? So that similar sort of mentality addressing them happens, especially in the garment factories, right? Lamai, it became a very bad word, derogatory too, to call them. So then when you start calling them in that way, it goes, I feel it moves away from a professional relationship to a more personal, and sometimes it becomes difficult also. Yeah.
Yeah, so in our culture, age plays a role in maintaining hierarchies. So when you say lamaya, it ensures consciously, unconsciously that you are subordinate to me. You're mage lamaya, pe lamai. We are not equal at any point. So it's a way of keeping them in their place. When you say putta, also you're keeping them at a place. We are not in the same level. You are lower to me, but you don't say it in that way.
Sorry, Pastor, I think I stalled you there. Sorry. You can continue. I think maybe what we can maybe talk about is, we spoke a little bit about what corporates can do. Maybe if you could also expand. Sorry, is there a question?
Good afternoon. Professor Pavithra, so I'm also in the apparel industry, and one of the challenges we have is at a team member level, we are predominantly female, a team leader level, predominantly female, group leader level, predominantly female, and then you come to executive, and it just flips, right? So being a process person, I've been trying to understand why, right? And it maybe relates to some of the conversation you had here, because you're talking about corporates. If you don't mind going to the job description, you had the slide which had the male. So when I was trying to figure out why, I found that if you look at a lot of the JDs, right, and y'all are from the HR community, never speak about the capability you need to do a job, right? So here you see oversee F&B division to ensure smooth. But if you break it down and say, what do you need to do that? What is the capability you need? And when we started to articulate the capability, we made it a much more level playing field, right? Because then the perception is taken out, because you have a clear standard around capability. We've been trying to bring this in even to for a plant general manager, or general manager -1, to right up to the group leader, because we wanted to make it very transparent around what's the capability I need to have for me to have that next job, right? And I think in the HR profession, we don't use capability. We always, if you take 9 out of 10 JDs, it will tell you what you need to do for that in that job role. But what do I need to have to do that job role, I think is something that will completely make this very transparent, right? Because in the corporate world, if you can clear ambiguity, you make the path a little easier and a little easier and a little easier. So that's something we've tried, and we start to see is working, because it also creates equal opportunity, right? Because I know I need product knowledge, right? I know I need lean implementation knowledge, or I know I need financial acumen to, at this level. So that is something I just wanted to share and get your feedback, whether you all have looked at this as an avenue of trying to remove those barriers and create transparency.
So HR usually prepares 2 documents for every job, JD and job specification. So what you are talking about in terms of capabilities, skills, the knowledge that are required are or should be described in job specification. So when you place an advertisement, both parts should be there. So it's basically what you are saying is care should be, there should be care when we write not just the JD, but even job specification when we are describing skills, capability, that unconsciously we don't have this think manager or ideal worker things to blind us. We have to really question, is this really required for this job? Are we just exaggerating and having this ideal thing and putting it here so that then it doesn't fit the women, right? So yeah, specification is what we look for, yeah.
About this other factor that we were discussing in garments, how we call lamea, and then the difference where all the operational level employees would be mainly female, and when you go up, especially the production manager of a factory or the HR manager would, in many instances, be male. So we are doing this research, me and a colleague of mine, we are looking at this gendered practices in garment factories, and we've realized that they are very careful in recruiting male operators. The selection criteria is very strict when they want to get a male to the organization. They would look at their police report, they would even see whether they have tattoos on, whether they have cuts in their faces, all of that, to see whether they can manage, whether they can control the worker is the main thing that they look at. And they think that having females, it's very easy to control. They are disciplined, they wouldn't question you, and especially when you have a male manager managing this female, it's even more easier. Women are subordinates, that's how we are brought up. So we would listen to the male manager. We are always in our houses used to listening to our brothers, our fathers, the males in our houses, and that's how we are treated. We are socialized. So those gendered practices are very much in existence even now in organizations that talk so much about women. Of course, they do a lot of things for women, and they are trying to make workplaces women-friendly and all of that. But in certain instances, they have missed these parts where they have forgotten why we have a male manager and female machine operators. There was this one instance where I went for an event at a school, and all the teachers were females, and this principal was very proudly telling me, we have all females, and that's because I can manage them very easily. I don't have any issues when I have these female teachers. And the moment that I get a male teacher, a lot of issues. So it's there not only in garment, there are that situation is there in in many industries.
So I think, as you correctly said, it's socialization, right? And what we learn from our home, we obviously bring to work, and in our work decisions, it is reflected in the manner we speak, the way we take decisions, and so on.
So I think Professor Arosha just touched on the question I was going to ask, which was one of the statistics that you showed was that the teachers' union, the nurses, all of that, mainly dominated by females. But the trade union leaders are male. So I have two questions. One is why? Because I think women are also able to do that role. Second thing is it a bad thing? Because I think women work better at resolving a bigger problem and making sure, now even as the teachers union, teachers association or nurses, they are not those positions of power, instead of focusing on that role, they are focusing on the bigger picture of taking care of people. That's how I see it, and I think, is it a bad thing? Because it's not for me. So what do you think about it?
Very interesting. Not a bad thing is what it, not necessarily a bad thing is what you're trying.
Isn't it a good thing that they focus on taking care of the society or taking care of the larger groups, whereas sometimes the people who do come into power as leaders, union leaders, are coming with a different agenda, maybe?
We all have answers for that. But I will just give one or two, and I'm sure you will add to that. So one issue that I see in this is that when majority are females and then the leaders are men, the issues of women are not represented there. So their agendas would be different, what they look at is different, and also how they solve issues are different. You need a good balance to have good decisions, to make good decisions. That balance is not there. You know, so it's a few who would make decisions about a majority who might have a totally different set of needs. So that is something, that is one that is wrong in that. And the other fact is, it's not where women might not necessarily want to be in those positions. It's the culture that is set up in a way that women are reluctant to go into that position, those positions. Because again, damn if you do, damn if you don't. So when women go and fight in the roads, you know, and if you see women being replaced by men on TV when they talk about a trade union action, about their right, and women shouting and say, we want this, what would the viewers say? You know, see how that woman is behaving. Is that a way women should behave? And women know that if I go to that position, this is what will happen to me. And one of the main ways that women are put away from those positions are these, you know, rumors that are spread. You see any woman coming up for an election, for a position, the first thing those that are around them would do, men and women both, would do is spread rumors saying, you know, you tarnish the so-called reputation of a woman. And women are scared of that. That doesn't happen with men. Now, when a man, you know, goes for election or, you know, wants to take up a leadership position, there would be other things that is said against them, but not the reputation. They wouldn't try to tarnish the reputation. And again, in our society, for a female, the good woman, the reputation is very, very important. It's important for the person, for the family, for the children, for everybody. If you are being you know, said to be a bad woman, a disrespectful woman, a promiscuous woman, you know, your chances of marriage and being accepted is lost. Your parents would be shunned, and, you know, all of that. So all of these keep women away. So, you know, you need to create that culture where they have the opportunity, they can also go for these positions and actually represent. You know, those positions are to represent them. Represent the profession. Yes.
To go to that position, I think appreciating what women also bring is important, because going and acting like a male representative is, I think we are then diminishing ourselves. So what I was trying to get at even at that question was the nurses, the teachers, we should really appreciate what they bring to the table and appreciate the femininity, the power of the female majority there.
Yeah,
and
true.
Which gets diminished with the leader being a male.
Yeah, so that again is ideal leader that we are talking about also. And what is femininity? Who came up with this, you know, where you need to be feminine? We all have, like she said, we are not homogeneous. We, in certain instances, we might be feminine. In our looks, we might be feminine, but in our work, we might not be. So who are we to say that, you know, these positions should be, we have to have our femininity and do it? It's not possible. You know, with certain work, we can't be men no, so if you don't have that ideal worker, or you have to be a man or a woman to do this, but instead whoever is capable, whoever has the qualifications, whoever is willing to do it, we need to create that, context for them. Sorry, you had also.
Just to share quickly about plantation workers, because I have experience and I've been in trade union meetings with these plantations. And they are supposed to appoint 2 members. One is a Talaivi and a Talaiva, a male and a female worker who should represent the trade union. So, but when you look at what's actually happening in the trade union, the female trade union leaders make tea for the male trade union leaders during the meetings. And also during meetings, when women speak, they are not heard. Their voices, nobody, she gets up and speaks and nobody listens to her. All the men are getting up and speaking up. I've witnessed this myself. And also with regard to these rumors, it's actually happening because these different divisions have trade union leaders, male and female, and they have to travel to the district to represent in that trade union meeting. So then they travel together in the bus, which is a real problem for females, because then they are saying these guys are having an affair, which creates a problem. So women appoint another man to represent her in these trade union meetings, which the voices are all gone when that happens. So just to reiterate, it is generally, the voices of women are actually not coming up in such instances.
What I wanted to point out is whether it's leadership in trade unions or sort of extra, sort of outside the work, additional work, what happens is because of our traditional way how unpaid work is also, the division of unpaid work in Sri Lanka among the families, most of the responsibility of childcare and household is on the women, right? So these trade union meetings are like in the evenings, nights, weekends, so they are unable to leave the unpaid work part to somebody else unless the husband is willing to share the household work or childcare work and say, okay, go along, it's good for you, you go and do your trade union work, I will look after. Unless there is a supportive spouse like that, that also prevents things. Because, it's not exactly the same, but we used to see this trend many years ago, for a long time in our faculty, being a business faculty, management faculty. As I said, it used to be like 50-50, now it's getting more at the undergraduate level, the student population. But if you look at our MBA student population, it's like handful of women and majority are men. So we always ask the question, like, so many are graduating, half or more than half. What's happening? Where is the leak happening? Why are they dropping out? Because this is needed for their career progression. So in this career stage, why aren't they coming for their postgraduate qualification? Why it's women? So again, that's the age they are married, having children. So it's preventing them from furthering. So it's that because women are held responsible, right? Maybe I can also share my experience. I was the only women part of the office bearers of the Federation of University Teachers Association many years ago. I was the only female and I was the treasurer, and quite a lot of the meetings I used to be the one to serve the cake or tea or whatever. Even though I was the treasurer, I used to do that. And until one point, I started questioning, and other men also started questioning, why is it always Pavithra serving, or cleaning up after the meeting? Everybody should start doing. So it's that, mentality, Yeah,
just that it's not only that, even talking about this in the faculty, we are the ones who would fight for this. And that itself is negatively reflected on us, difficult characters to work with sometimes. Or being known as a feminist is seen negatively. So, so lot of, complexities and things there.
Can I ask a question? Okay. So we have two things, I think, to fight. One is our culture and also the power structures. And in terms of power structures, when we have organizations like, say, the societies that you put up there, and the fact that they have only males there means that even the society doesn't have rules to ensure that others can come up. You know, what I usually find is always the older people who are on those, the younger people are very underrepresented. And is there ways that you can have rules and change the norms in there? Like, for instance, a society of engineers, they can easily say that we will have some in the 50-year-old bracket, 40-year-old bracket, 30-year-old bracket. And you choose men and women in those areas. And those are simple fixes that if we kind of inculcate into their minds, they can make the change. And I'm seeing that you all are talking to students, management students, people who form companies. They can say our director board should be 50-50. Some old, some young, and this whole diversity aspect can be written into to policy and to rules. So I think the same way they're trying to do it into local government elections, putting a representative, I think corporates and all that can make their own rules. And do you see that kind of thing being feasible? Are people doing it?
So I think we are going to touch upon this because I think in the last slide of Pavitra's, she does talk about the corporate role and also an individual role. So maybe we'll first go ahead with the best practices for organizations and then we'll go to the individual.
So first I will address that one because yes, there is a, at least I know, I mean, so recently there was this awards by SEMA and Satin for female-friendly organizations. So there were organizations that were striving for fairer representations at all levels. And I know there is a tech company which has these targets because it's a foreign company. So based on their local companies and for like, I know this specific tech company which had 40% target, which they were struggling to meet in Sri Lanka, but that was set by Sweden. So yeah, so good, I would say good family, female-friendly organizations can and should have targets at least to initially to make sure when they make decisions that they are conscious that fairer representations are needed at all levels, not like the example the previous gentleman was saying that, you know, there is over-representation, whatever, at lower levels, but not at the higher level. So it should be there at all levels. So one of the ways of, I suppose, in addition to having targets, because sometimes what happens is when you have targets, numbers, then it also, there is a backlash saying, okay, you got in because of the target, women got in because, not because you were really good, yeah, you deserved this, you didn't, I mean, the same thing happened in the US when they started affirmative action, right? That was for African Americans and all that. They always sort of had this, whites were looking at, okay, you got in because you were a black, not because they had the capability or knowledge. So we have to be a bit mindful of that too. But yes, targets like the local government elections. So if you can make, so there are organizations that are making the workplace more comfortable, safe, to encourage more women to come in. So when you say safe and comfortable workplaces, like having, like in terms of comfortable, there was this supermarket chain that was making accommodation in terms of the machines that were used to suit women. So which is similar what we do for accommodation, you know, when you want disabled people too, right? So I'm not saying women are disabled, but what I'm saying is organizations can make an effort if they really want to employ making workplaces safer and comfortable, because then you will, I mean, there are certain companies, there is, even if there is no vacancy advertisement, there is so much unsolicited applications coming to that organization because they have a reputation that they are a company with equal opportunity or women are encouraged, right? So if you can have, as part of your culture, equality, equity, have all these policies that are, and practice it with no penalty, have these comfortable, safe work environments there. So in this, during this awards, it was found that there are organizations that have domestic violence halfway homes, menstruation leave, these targets, fairer representation, going the wrong way, okay. Holding it the wrong way, right. And there are some garment manufacturers who have empowerment program to not only, so that sort of, these empowerment programs are like for their future, because we know a lot of the lower level garment factory people stay there to collect their dowry and then leave. So give them skills so that they can become entrepreneurs, whatever programs. Mentoring program that you were looking at. So if there are certain professions when there are less women, like in the shipping, logistics, you can use the few women who are there as role models, encourage them so that more women come in. And I also found that part of the empowerment, encouragement, there is one plantation company that has started appointing women as kanganis. Of course, they don't call them as kangani, they are calling them team leaders. But so now there is sort of at least a career progression for them. So that women, of course, there was a lot of resistance and a lot of hand-holding to do, but maybe it's in the right direction. And we were also talking about voice mechanisms. So have a lot of voice mechanisms some of these companies are having, whether it's hotlines, committees, focus groups. When I was studying in Melbourne, I was the student representative for the committee on diversity of our faculty. So there were representatives from the academic, students, administration, where quarterly or something we met to make sure we were, what was happening in terms of gender, whether we were meeting the numbers and things like that. So you have to make a conscious, so the best practices are, it is a continued fight and continued effort to make, to reach gender equality and equity. Yeah.
I think I have a question for you, Pavithra. I don't think in Sri Lanka, many of us are very familiar with menstrual leave, right? We've heard about it, we've read about it in certain countries, legalizing it. Could you maybe expand a little bit on that?
So maybe before that, I suppose even the taboo advertisements about sanitary napkins being wrapped in newspapers, the Kottamalli advertisement and all that. So it's, one thing is, yeah, it's not spoken about, it's not sort of hidden thing, but so it's this MNC that is giving, so it's not part of the sick leave, right? It's an additional leave, because there are women who suffer, they have medical issue, cramps and, you know, various pain and all that. So on the first day, when it's really bad, they can apply for menstrual leave. Yeah.
Thank you. Do you want any clarifications on domestic violence and halfway homes? Because I know these are like new topics for Sri Lanka.
So it's not that this company is running its own, but they have links with organizations so that if there is an issue, when somebody calls on hotline, somebody can take them and arrange. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think in Sri Lanka, for the large part, most corporates view domestic violence as like a private matter within the family and something that the corporates don't need to really get involved with.
Well, if they can provide creche daycare facilities, it's also child is their issue, their problem. But then there are some companies that are, including our university, they do provide childcare, aftercare facility. So if that is a personal issue that the company can do, why not this? Plantation sector, not for their, for the love of their staff, but for the, because of the high absenteeism, started providing creche facility, right? So, yeah.
Yes, different kind of logics for having some, that's true. Pavithra, in the interest of time, shall we go towards what individuals can do, like what each of us can do?
So for me, basically, whether even if the organizations make an effort, it's the people in the end who have to believe in it and do, right? So first and foremost, as I said earlier, it has to be our awareness, how much we are aware about it, how much we are sensitive about the gender issues that are taking place in the society and in the workplaces. We need to be aware. So as I said, we are strong feminists, but I have my own biases. So usually I'm a very traditional or conservative in the way I dress, but that's me. But I won't use that value to pass judgment on, let's say, sexual harassment, to say, oh, she deserves it because look at the way she dressed. I wouldn't pass judgment. It's the way so we need to be aware of what our biases are, who we are, and this is a different fight. So first and foremost, we need to accept who we are, what our biases are, what our beliefs are. And another thing that really helps in the household, as well as what we do in the outside sphere, is how much the spouses share the unpaid work, right? So our recent study of unpaid work during COVID, we found that even before COVID, unpaid work was gendered. Even during COVID, it was even more gendered. Because both are working at home, but the husband will say, oh, don't disturb me, I have office, I have to work. So does the wife, right? But she had to manage the children's online education, cook, because most of these middle class dual earner couples, the domestics were not there during the COVID. So they had the added home care, child care, plus they are working from home work as well. So they had like the double, triple burden. So after my PhD research was on work-family content. So whenever people ask, tell us something about your research. So I always used to say in Sri Lanka, stop looking at horoscopes when you want to marry. The matching thing was look at your spouse's gender role ideology, what they believe in terms of gender. That is more important than horoscopes to marry a person, right? So share housework, the person should also be equally believing in equality and equity, and then bring that down to your children. Subtle messages that we give over life of the kid makes what the child becomes when they're adult. Starting from pink and blue dress. Why? I don't know, right? Pink and blue, from the painting of the room to the dresses, the toys we give, dolls and cooking utilities for the utensils for the girl, gun and car and racing kit, birthday decorations, everything, right? So over time, we are giving that messages that boy is different, girl is different, mothers, when they are mothers, when they want help with the cooking or setting the table, ask the daughter. Son, maybe outside work. So we are instilling in them from birth that this is what the woman's role is, this is what the men's role is. It's boys don't cry. You shouldn't show emotions. Even if you fall, oh, it's okay, don't cry. For women, they will say, don't worry, by the time you grow up, this scar won't be there, you will still look beautiful, right? So we have to be very conscious how we are bringing up those kids. Don't cry, don't run like a girl, don't run like a girl, don't run like a boy, cry baby. And even if a girl tries to, do other, so-called boys thing, tomboy, don't be a sissy for the boys, right? Society always tries to make that distinction and don't let them cross the boundary of boy become, doing girl thing and girl. So the research has shown an ideal manager, best manager, is somebody who is what we call androgyny, meaning who has both masculine and feminine qualities, so that depending on the situation, you can show emotion if you need to. If somebody, as employee, subordinate comes with a problem, both whether it's male or female, will have nurturing quality to listen and calm them. But if you need to be aggressive, whether it's male or, so you need to be, and it's sort of like a portfolio of behaviors that you need to have so that you are androgyny, right? That doesn't mean androgyny is LGBTQ or whatever. That's not what that's an entirely different thing, but you know, you have both sets of qualities that it's something that you can train. If you want to be aggressive, you can. As teachers, we need to shout for 200 people, right, without a mic. So I can't say, I'm a female, my voice is only this, I can't talk like that. No, we had, in this profession, we had to, you know, do that. So it's all about our attitude and how we are brought up. I know we are going over time.
No, I think we are right. So thank you so much for the panelists. I think we learned a lot in terms of grounding some of the work we do in corporates and trying to have a holistic approach. If we know the systemic obstacles or challenges that women face, then whenever we are intervening with whatever the methods we are trying, be it introducing daycare facilities, flexi hours, and I think it's introducing it so that all employees can use it. By doing that, we break the gender division of labor. If we say flexible hours or for females only, then we are again, I think we are upholding the gender divisions of labor. And I think one participant from the audience was saying that in the newer generations, the males are far more involved in family care, and they too face stigma. Like I think research has spoken about flexibility stigma. If they do apply for the flexible working hours, like, you know, they're not serious about their work. So men too are also suffering because of some of these gendered organizations and ideal worker. Correct, that's right. So if there are any last questions, we can take them.
Hi, this question is for the panel, really. Thank you for sharing your insights. We were just wondering, Professor Pavithra referenced this, the leak, right? When at a certain age or at a time, women drop out of the workforce. Do we have, so that's the usual answers of, okay, childcare and marriage, all of that. Is there anything else that you have found in your research to be reasons for these ladies to leave the workforce?
Yeah, in addition to marriage, children, it's also about the lack of career progression, who your super boss is. Sometimes they think, you know, can't work under this person, I want to do my own job, right? And also the working environment, you know, sometimes these long working hours and the stress that's put, the expectation that you should be, you know, 24/7 on and all that. So those type of things are pushing women away from the labor force so that they can be their own bosses. Which also allows them sometimes, depending on what the business they start, flexibility, working from home, and so on. Yeah.
Is that why they don't progress into leadership positions, because they drop out at that time? Are they?
They are not necessarily. There are some few who say, you know, I like to move up, but along with moving up comes more responsibility and more stress. And sometimes you need to play organizational politics to move up. I don't want to, right? I know it's less salary, whatever, but let me stay at this level. So there are some who say that too.
just want to ask, yeah, we heard a lot of diversity topics in our level, and I see a lot of lack of awareness in the ground level in rural areas. This lead to a lot of issues. You know, I definitely talk about the school curriculum. It's from there inwards, we have to think about change or a framework which govern this segment. Then look at your TV and the advertisement which goes, and when you see a dining table, what gives to the message to the society, little things, but we are still there. I don't know when we are reaching what we talk about now. So we are in the I'm from manufacturing, and I have 90% of the women workforce. We try to make a lot of awareness. We try to resolve a lot of household issues and doing counselings. We do 2-3 days, and same person will be after 2-3 days in the same situation. It's not easy when it's going to the ground level. So what we can do on a national level, and that's my thing.
Because let's say you counsel, do something, make them aware, maybe, but they have to go back to that same house, right? So then when they try to resist, maybe the situation can become from verbal abuse to violent. I know they said during COVID, with the lockdown, the burns unit of the National Hospital was overflowing with women with burn injuries due to domestic violence. Because people were at home, so various, stress and various things all bottled up they were taking against the wives. So the burns unit was the only ward that was, overflowing with. So, yeah, so I totally agree, because one of the points I wanted to raise was also where I talked about the products, advertisements, and in hope, this textbooks, right? It's very much, in textbooks, if you look at family, father, mother, a son and a daughter, there is no other different form of families. Single women-headed household. After the war, we have so many women-headed household. There is no description of women-headed household. There can be male-headed household, right? No, and like you said, always father will come back from home, work, mother in a sari, cooking and serving the father first, and standing and serving. So that's the message we are. So this fight has to be at many levels, individual levels, curriculum, in schools, parents, how they bring up, the teachers, the message they give, right? So in teacher training schools, we have to include this awareness about gender equality and equity for teachers as well, so that they also don't, try to enforce that in school if they see people who are sort of behaving in a different way or equal or equity way. So yeah, it's massive, yeah, never ending. You'll have sleepless nights thinking about that.
Firstly, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. Wonderful conversation. Just one question. I think internationally, we have a lot of men, because I know that area, we have a lot of men researching on these topics. But I just wanted to understand, like locally, do you work with other men who research on this area, and how supportive are they?
Yes. Now, with regard to my research, I'm working with my professor, who is a male. Yes, who's abroad, yeah. Not in this country, yeah.
And not three really. No, we always get together, but yeah, good point. But on gender in terms of LGBT, Q, I've worked with male researchers, but yeah, on women.
Internationally, there is also a problem of, yes, whose voice is being represented. So when initially there was a lot of researchers who were male, and then they looked at it from their perspective. And so there was a need for female researchers to do research about themselves. So that created a different angle. So there's a lot of, even internationally, there's a lot of women who are doing about women's research. Of course, men are also there, but in Sri Lanka, I guess would be few. Yeah. Thank you for bringing that point out. Yeah.
So I think with that we can wrap up. Thank you so much for the panelists, and I will hand it over to Natalie.
Okay, thank you. So I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank our three panelists. Thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom, your research, and advice for us corporates, and spending the time with us. So we really appreciate it. And please accept a little token of our appreciation. Pavithra, I have one for you. Thank you. No worries. Seuwandhi, this one? Yeah. Thank you. Next, thank you, Gayani. I'd really like to call out all your support, your idea to do this, and the coordination for us on behalf of DCLK. We couldn't have done it without you. Next, Twinery for giving us this space, and also open it up to let us have other corporates in here. And a special call out to the HR team, Dimuth in particular, for all his support to us, DCLK. And next, Articulate, of course, for their continued support in continuing to making us showcase our work and have the conversation going. And lastly, all of you, thank you so much for all the conversation, the input, the questions, especially here and online. We had a live stream growing, so thank you to MAS for that as well. So thank you. We hope we I think we did have a great conversation, and we learned and shared some things. Thank you on behalf of DCLK.